Sometimes the quietest places hold the loudest secrets. Jack Carter murmured to himself as he guided his old pickup down the narrow dirt road that snaked through the dense northern forest. Rex, his 6-year-old German shepherd, perched alertly in the passenger seat, ears pricked and amber eyes scanning every shadow, as if reading the whispers of the trees themselves. The winter air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine resin and the faint tang of frost that coated each branch with glittering ice crystals, and the first rays of the morning sun caught the tips of the pines, painting the forest in a pale gold haze. Jack's hands, roughened by years of labor and service, gripped the steering wheel while his mind wandered over the endless nights he had spent sleeping in abandoned barns and beneath the open sky, the loneliness pressing against him like the cold wind through the cracked windows of his past. Rex nudged his shoulder softly, reminding him of the present, and Jack smiled faintly, a curve of relief amid the hard lines of his face, the stubble along his jaw catching the light like fine dust. When they reached the clearing, the cabin appeared like a relic from another time, its gray weathered boards leaning at uneven angles, the roof sagging, half hidden beneath a blanket of snow, icicles hanging like fragile crystal daggers along the eaves. Jack parked the truck, boots crunching over frozen leaves and snow, and exhaled a cloud of vapor that merged with the mist rising from the forest floor. He stepped down, and Rex leapt lightly beside him, Paws landing silently on the snow-dusted ground. The cabin exuded a strange silence, the kind that made the hairs on Jack's neck rise and filled Rex with an intensity that demanded caution. Jack approached the crooked door, the hinges groaning faintly as he nudged it open, revealing a shadowed interior dusted with years of neglect and the faint smell of damp wood. Rex advanced, nose twitching, ears swiveling at the faintest shift of air, and a low, urgent growl vibrated from his chest, not threatening but insistent, guiding Jack's gaze to a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Jack's pulse quickened as he descended carefully, the weak light from the cracked windows above casting long, wavering shadows along the rough-hewn walls. At the bottom, a soft sound reached him, a gentle, anxious breathing, and Jack froze, listening. Rex's paw pressed against the floorboards again. Then he looked back at Jack, amber eyes wide and insistent, and Jack understood. The cabin held more than empty rooms. Someone was here. Moving forward with deliberate calm, Jack found her. Emily Thompson, her form curled protectively, hand resting on her round belly, eyes wide and relieved as they met his. The chill in the air was momentarily forgotten as he knelt, offering a warm blanket from his pack, while Rex settled protectively beside her, the dog's presence anchoring the fragile calm. Outside, the wind rattled through broken panes, carrying the scent of snow and wet pine. But inside the cabin, the three of them shared a quiet heartbeat, the faint crackle of a small fire Jack coaxed to life blending with the distant hum of the forest. Jack's voice was low and soothing as he spoke to Emily, assuring her that she was safe, and Rex's soft whine punctuated the warmth of the moment, their connection forming a bond that reached beyond fear and isolation. As the sun rose higher, spilling muted gold across the frost-laden floor, Jack took in the cabin's contours, the corners filled with shadows and untold stories, and he realized that what had begun as a simple act of finding shelter had turned into something far greater, a chance to protect, to nurture, and to discover a secret waiting patiently for the right hands, guided by loyalty, courage, and the unspoken understanding of a dog who had never led him astray. As the late afternoon light filtered through the frost-lined windows, painting the cabin interior in soft amber tones, Jack Carter moved with deliberate care, gathering fallen boards and stacking them neatly against the wall, the rhythm of his work a silent meditation in the stillness of the forest. Rex padded silently beside him, ears swiveling toward every faint sound outside, alert yet calm, a steadfast companion whose presence radiated reassurance. Emily Thompson sat wrapped in a thick woolen blanket, the warmth from the small fire dancing across her face, her fingers tracing the texture of the fabric as she watched Jack, noting the careful way he handled each object, the gentle patience in his movements, and feeling a cautious sense of trust begin to replace the lingering tension of her earlier fear. The cabin, with its weathered boards and uneven floor, held the quiet weight of decades, and Jack felt the pulse of its history beneath his fingers as he brushed away the accumulated dust, imagining the lives that had passed through this space and the stories that had been whispered into its walls. Outside, a gentle breeze stirred the pine needles, carrying the scent of snow and sap, and the sunlight softened into a golden hue, illuminating the frost that clung stubbornly to the eaves, creating tiny rainbows as the light refracted through the ice. Jack paused in his work, leaning against a wall and exhaling slowly, his eyes scanning the shadows, and Rex responded instantly, nudging a loose floorboard with a careful paw, alerting him to a subtle irregularity that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Jack knelt beside it, fingers tracing the contours of the worn wood, feeling the faint vibration of a hollow space beneath, a silent whisper of the secrets still held by the cabin, and he smiled faintly at the thought that the forest and the house itself seemed to acknowledge their presence, guiding them towards something greater than mere shelter. Emily shifted slightly, curiosity brightening her expression as she watched the interaction between man and dog, sensing the unspoken understanding that connected them, a bond forged in shared hardship and quiet devotion. Jack rose and retrieved a small toolkit from his pack, the sound of metal against metal echoing softly in the otherwise still room as he carefully pried at the edges of the floorboard, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside lay a collection of personal items, letters, and a small bundle wrapped carefully in cloth, each object telling a fragment of the life that had once occupied this cabin, and Jack felt a reverent stillness, aware that he was stepping into a space where history and memory had been preserved with care. He gently set aside the contents, mindful of their fragility, and looked to Emily, whose eyes shone with a mixture of wonder and gratitude, her hand resting protectively over her stomach, sensing the quiet significance of the discovery. The wind outside shifted, rustling through the trees and carrying the faint murmur of distant water, and Jack felt a moment of clarity, a sense that the day had unfolded exactly as it should, with timing and presence guiding them to this point. Rex let out a soft, approving whine, his gaze fixed on the hidden compartment, and Jack nodded, understanding the dog's intuition had once again led them to a truth that might otherwise have remained concealed. As the sun began its descent, bathing the cabin in long shadows and deepening the golden light, Jack prepared a modest meal, sharing portions with Emily while they discussed what might be done to make the cabin safe and comfortable, the act of collaboration weaving a sense of connection and purpose between them. The aroma of cooked vegetables and warm bread mingled with the scent of the forest drifting in through the cracks, creating a comforting atmosphere, and Emily smiled softly for the first time since they had arrived, feeling a sense of safety and belonging that had seemed elusive until this moment. Jack observed her carefully, noting the subtle relaxation in her posture, the ease in her breathing, and the gentle way Rex lay at her feet, protective yet unobtrusive, and he felt a quiet satisfaction, the deep contentment that comes from knowing one has provided care and security where it was needed most. The forest outside darkened gradually, the last rays of sunlight catching the frost and making it glimmer like scattered jewels, and Jack looked around the cabin, imagining the possibilities, the repairs that could be made, the space transformed into a home, a sanctuary not just for shelter, but for hope, and he allowed himself a brief moment to feel that hope, a quiet ember glowing against the lingering chill of the past. Emily reached out to place her hand on Rex's fur, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about trust and companionship, and Jack felt the weight of the day lift slightly, the tension easing as they shared the warmth and light, the cabin no longer merely a refuge from the cold, but a place where connection, care, and the promise of new beginnings had taken root. The evening settled over the forest with a gentle hush, the sky painted in deep indigo streaked with fading amber as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted ground outside the cabin. Jack Carter moved deliberately, checking the structural integrity of the main room, running his gloved hands along the beams and corners, noting areas that would require attention before the snow became heavier and the nights colder. Rex padded beside him, ears attentive to every creak and groan of the old wood, tail low but steady, a silent sentinel ensuring that nothing escaped their notice. Emily Thompson sat on the edge of a worn wooden chair, her hands folded over her lap, eyes following every movement with a mixture of curiosity and quiet relief, the warmth from the fire casting a gentle glow across her face and highlighting the fine lines of tension that were gradually softening. Jack paused by a small window, brushing away frost to peer out at the forest, the snow-laden pines glistening in the last light, the wind stirring faintly as it whispered through the branches, carrying the crisp scent of winter and pine sap, and he felt a quiet connection to the world beyond the cabin walls, a reminder that even in isolation, life moved with purpose. Rex let out a soft whine and shifted toward the corner of the room where the hidden compartment had been, pressing his nose against the floorboards, signaling that the cabin held more to discover, secrets tucked away that had patiently waited for someone to care enough to uncover them. Jack knelt, following the dog's lead, carefully lifting another board and revealing a small collection of letters and trinkets left by a previous occupant, each item telling a story of days long past, moments of joy and solitude preserved in silence. Emily leaned forward, fascinated, tracing the edges of a faded photograph with her finger, imagining the life it once represented, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth as she realized that this cabin was not just shelter, but a vessel of memory, a bridge between the past and their emerging present. Jack placed the items gently on a nearby table, mindful of their fragility, and began to organize the space, moving debris and stacking logs for the fire with precise, thoughtful motions, each action a quiet meditation, a reaffirmation of his purpose and care. The wind shifted again, carrying the distant sound of flowing water from a brook hidden among the trees, and the cabin seemed to breathe with them, the shadows and light dancing across the floorboards creating a sense of movement and life even within the still walls. As night deepened, Jack prepared a modest meal, warming canned vegetables over the fire and offering a portion to Emily, who accepted with a nod, the act of sharing creating a gentle bond between them, a rhythm of trust and quiet companionship forming in the dim, flickering light. Rex rested at Emily's feet, alert yet calm, occasionally lifting his head to catch a sound from outside, the snow falling silently beyond the cabin walls, a blanket of stillness that wrapped around them, comforting and protective. Jack watched the fire, feeling the warmth seep through his layers, his mind reflecting on the journey that had brought them here, the chance encounter that had led to this moment, and the unspoken understanding that even the smallest acts of care could change the course of lives in ways both profound and unexpected. Emily sipped from a cup of warm cocoa, the sweet liquid mingling with the scent of the fire and the cabin's aged wood, a sense of safety enveloping her as she glanced at Jack and Rex, gratitude and relief mirrored in her eyes. The shadows grew longer, and the night deepened into a gentle quiet, punctuated only by the subtle crackle of the fire and the faint rustling of the forest outside, a lullaby of wind and snow. Jack placed a hand on Rex's back, feeling the solid warmth of the dog's body, and a sense of reassurance passed through him, a reminder of the loyalty and instinct that had guided them here. Together, the three of them sat in that small cabin, surrounded by the soft glow of firelight and the hush of the forest, a fragile yet growing sense of home taking root. The space no longer simply a refuge from the cold, but a place where trust, safety, and the promise of new beginnings quietly blossomed into hope. The first stars began to appear in the clear night sky above the forest, their faint glow reflected in the patches of ice that clung to the branches outside, creating a delicate shimmer that made the world feel both vast and intimate at the same time. Jack Carter moved quietly through the cabin, tending the fire to ensure it would last through the long, cold night, the warmth spreading softly into the corners and casting a comforting glow over the worn wooden walls. Rex shifted slightly, lying closer to Emily Thompson, his head resting near her knees, eyes half closed yet alert, listening to the subtle creaks of the cabin and the distant whisper of wind through the trees. Emily sipped slowly from her warm mug, the chocolate aroma mingling with the scent of the fire and the faint, earthy fragrance of the cabin, her posture gradually relaxing as she felt the safety of the space and the steady presence of Jack and Rex around her. Jack moved to a small table where he had set aside the letters and trinkets found in the hidden compartments, examining each piece with careful attention, his fingers tracing the faded edges and worn surfaces, recognizing the quiet stories embedded in the objects, and imagining the lives of those who had once occupied the cabin. He glanced toward Emily, seeing the flicker of curiosity and wonder in her eyes, and nodded slightly, acknowledging that the history of the place was now a part of their shared experience, and that the cabin was more than just a shelter. It was a bridge to understanding, connection, and the unfolding of new possibilities. Outside, the wind picked up briefly, sending a shower of loose snowflakes swirling past the window, and the sound of the forest became a soft, rhythmic accompaniment to the calm inside. The contrast between the quiet warmth of the cabin and the crisp chill of the night reinforcing the feeling of sanctuary. Jack returned to Emily, offering her a spare blanket, which she accepted with a grateful smile, and Rex nudged her gently, as if to affirm that she was safe and cared for. Jack's movements were deliberate and unhurried as he arranged the few belongings they had, creating small pockets of order and stability in the room. The repetition of simple tasks bringing a quiet sense of accomplishment and reinforcing the notion that care and attention could transform even the most neglected spaces into places of comfort. Emily set her mug aside and began to look around the cabin more intently, noticing the interplay of light and shadow on the walls, the patterns of frost that clung to the window panes, and the small signs of resilience in the wood and stone, each detail reminding her that life could endure and flourish even in places that seemed abandoned or forgotten. Jack moved to the doorway and peered out into the darkened forest, the stars glinting above, and allowed himself a moment to breathe deeply, feeling the crisp air fill his lungs, the familiar scent of pine and snow grounding him in the present. Rex lifted his head, ears flicking toward a distant, indistinct sound, and Jack felt a familiar surge of reassurance, recognizing that the dog's instincts were as keen and reliable as ever, guiding them toward awareness and alertness without alarm. The fire crackled and popped gently, the warmth radiating across the cabin, and Jack sat beside Emily, sharing stories of past journeys in quiet, measured tones, the cadence of his voice blending with the soft ambient sounds of the cabin and forest, creating a rhythm of comfort, connection, and trust. Emily listened intently, a small smile playing across her lips, feeling a growing sense of belonging and safety, her hand resting lightly on Rex, who responded with a soft whine of contentment and a reassuring nudge. As the night deepened, the cabin became a cocoon of light, warmth, and subtle movement, the three of them sharing a silent understanding that this space, these moments, and their connection were the foundation of something new, fragile yet resilient, offering the promise of security, hope, and the quiet unfolding of life that was ready to begin in earnest as the forest slept under the gentle gaze of the stars. Morning light filtered softly through the frost-covered windows, spilling pale gold across the cabin floor and catching the edges of the scattered letters and trinkets that Jack Carter had carefully arranged the night before. Rex lay stretched at Emily Thompson's feet, his coat glinting faintly in the sunlight, ears perked at the faintest rustle of the forest beyond the cabin walls, a steady presence that brought a calm reassurance to the small space. Jack moved with deliberate care, adjusting the small fire to keep a steady warmth in the room, the rhythmic crackle of burning wood punctuating the quiet morning air as he poured a cup of hot tea and handed one to Emily, whose hands wrapped around the mug to draw in warmth and comfort. Outside, a gentle wind whispered through the snow-laden pines, carrying the crisp scent of winter and the faint trace of pine sap, and Jack paused at the window, letting the quiet scene sink in, the light refracting across ice crystals to create a soft, shimmering halo around the cabin. Emily sipped slowly, her gaze following a cluster of snowflakes twirling in the wind, and she felt a small, comforting sense of normalcy returning, her shoulders relaxing as the warmth of tea and the steady presence of Jack and Rex enveloped her. Jack shifted his attention to the cabin itself, moving carefully across the uneven floorboards, his gloved hands brushing dust from the worn surfaces, noting the small repairs that could be made, imagining how the space could transform into a home filled with safety, light, and hope. Rex rose, moving to a corner of the room where a faint draft slipped through a crack in the wall, his nose twitching, body tense but controlled, signaling to Jack that the cabin still held small surprises and secrets that demanded attention. Jack knelt beside the draft, placing a small patch of cloth over the opening and tucking it securely, feeling a quiet satisfaction in the act, a tangible reminder that care and attention could gradually turn a neglected space into a sanctuary. Emily rose and began helping, arranging cushions and small blankets, her movements careful, measured, creating a comfortable area near the fire, the simple act of preparation fostering a gentle sense of agency and connection between them. The sunlight grew brighter, illuminating subtle details of the cabin, the worn texture of the wood, the tiny frost crystals clinging to corners, the shadows dancing across surfaces in patterns that shifted with the movement of the sun. Jack encouraged Emily to examine the letters and photographs from the hidden compartments, sharing quiet observations about the delicate handwriting, the carefully folded notes, and the objects tucked away, allowing the history of the place to gently unfold around them, creating a sense of continuity and respect for the past. Rex lay close by, occasionally nudging an object with his paw, as if to affirm its significance, and Jack smiled faintly at the dog's intuition, recognizing once again the silent guidance that Rex provided. The warmth of the fire, the scent of pine and tea, and the soft light created a space that felt protected, the contrast between the cold forest outside and the inviting cabin interior emphasizing the comfort and security they now shared. Jack spoke in quiet tones, recounting memories from his own past journeys, the road, and moments of hardship, weaving stories that were gentle yet vivid, offering Emily a bridge to trust and understanding, and she responded with thoughtful questions and small stories of her own, their conversation building a shared sense of presence and connection. Outside, a soft wind carried the distant murmur of flowing water, and the forest seemed to breathe in tandem with the cabin, the quiet rhythm of nature echoing within their small sanctuary. As the morning progressed, Jack guided Emily to examine the cabin from a practical perspective, showing small adjustments and repairs, and together they began to visualize the space as a safe and nurturing home. The process was slow and deliberate, fostering a sense of accomplishment, collaboration, and quiet optimism, each careful movement reinforcing the foundation of trust and care that had begun to take root. Rex settled back at Emily's feet, alert but calm, and the three of them shared a quiet morning together, the cabin no longer merely a shelter, but a place where warmth, hope, and the quiet promise of new beginnings had begun to bloom. The forest outside had grown quieter as the afternoon light faded into a soft, muted glow, the snow on the branches catching the last rays of sun and sparkling like tiny fragments of crystal suspended in the air. Jack Carter moved carefully through the cabin, examining the small repairs he had started the day before, adjusting a loose beam here, securing a draft there, his hands steady and precise, guided by years of discipline and attention to detail. Rex followed closely, occasionally pausing to sniff the corners of the cabin or tilt his head toward a subtle sound beyond the walls, a gentle reminder that the world outside was alive and full of whispers. Emily Thompson sat on a blanket near the fire, tracing the patterns in the wood of the floorboards with her fingers, the warmth from the fire softening the chill in the room and creating a cozy cocoon around her. She watched Jack with quiet admiration, appreciating the care with which he handled both the cabin and the small items they had uncovered, the letters and trinkets now organized neatly on the table, each telling its own story of past inhabitants and their lives long before Emily and Jack had arrived. The cabin seemed to breathe with them, the subtle creaks of the beams and the soft pop of the fire merging with the faint whistle of the wind outside to create a rhythm that felt alive, yet soothing, a steady heartbeat within the walls of the old structure. Jack set down a small hammer and ran his hand across the rough surface of a wall, noticing the faint marks left by time, imagining the hands that had once touched these boards and the stories that had unfolded here, a sense of continuity bridging past and present. Emily reached for a small cushion and placed it beside her, inviting Rex to settle closer, and he obliged, nuzzling against her gently, tail sweeping in slow, measured movements, his amber eyes alert yet calm. Jack poured a cup of hot tea from the thermos, the steam curling in lazy spirals as he handed it to Emily, who accepted with a small smile, feeling the warmth seep into her hands and chest, a simple gesture reinforcing the sense of safety and care that had grown steadily between them. The light outside shifted as the sun dipped lower, casting long, golden shafts across the cabin floor, illuminating the subtle frost that lingered along the window edges, and Jack paused to breathe deeply, letting the cool, crisp air mingle with the warmth of the fire, grounding himself in the present moment. Rex let out a low, approving whine, nudging a small bundle of letters toward Jack, as if reminding him that there were still more stories to uncover, secrets patiently waiting beneath the surface of the cabin, and Jack knelt beside it, gently sifting through the papers, feeling a quiet thrill at the unfolding discovery. Emily leaned forward, intrigued, her eyes bright with curiosity, noticing the delicate handwriting and the careful folds of each note, imagining the lives of the people who had left them behind, and feeling a connection that transcended time and circumstance. Jack organized the letters carefully, stacking them in order and placing them back into the hidden compartment, ensuring their preservation while maintaining the integrity of the cabin, his movements deliberate and thoughtful, a reflection of his respect for the past and the quiet responsibility he felt for the present. Outside, the wind shifted again, rustling the branches in a gentle chorus, carrying the crisp scent of snow and pine, and the cabin seemed to absorb the sound, filling the space with a serene energy that was both comforting and invigorating. Jack turned to Emily, gesturing toward the small area near the fire, inviting her to help organize the blankets and cushions, creating a more comfortable and inviting space that felt increasingly like a home, a tangible manifestation of care and collaboration. As they worked together, the sun sank lower, casting a warm, soft glow across the cabin interior, the shadows lengthening and deepening, and a quiet sense of accomplishment settled over them, each small action reinforcing the bond that had begun to form between them. Rex lay between them, alert yet relaxed, tail sweeping in slow arcs, eyes following every movement, a constant and reassuring presence that anchored the room. Jack paused to take a sip of tea, letting the warmth spread through him, and observed Emily arranging the final touches, feeling a subtle sense of pride and calm, recognizing that the space they were creating together was more than just a shelter. It was a place of safety, trust, and the quiet promise of new beginnings, ready to grow and transform with the care and attention they were investing into it. The cabin settled into a gentle stillness as the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the frost-speckled windows, casting long, warm beams across the worn wooden floor. Jack Carter moved deliberately around the room, placing a few more logs on the fire, the gentle crackle of flames mingling with the soft whistle of wind drifting through the broken shutters, creating a rhythm that felt alive yet serene. Rex shifted, rising to his feet and pacing slowly along the perimeter, ears flicking at the slightest sound beyond the cabin walls, nose twitching as he caught the subtle sense of the forest, signaling to Jack that the quiet held layers of hidden life and untold stories. Emily Thompson adjusted the blankets around her shoulders and leaned closer to the fire, the warmth settling into her body, easing the tension that had held her since they had first discovered the cabin together. She glanced at Jack, noticing the focus and care in his movements, the way his hands handled each log and board with precision, and a quiet admiration stirred within her, mingled with gratitude for the calm and protection he offered. Jack paused by a window, brushing away a small curtain of frost to catch sight of the forest beyond, where the long shadows of the pines stretched across the snow in pale, glittering patterns. He took a deep breath, savoring the crisp scent of winter mingled with the faint aroma of pine smoke from a distant ridge, and felt a subtle sense of reassurance settle in his chest. Rex let out a soft, approving whine, nudging a small bundle of letters toward Jack, drawing his attention back to the hidden stories they had uncovered, reminding him that the cabin held more than just shelter, but a connection to the past patiently waiting to be understood. Jack carefully lifted the letters, smoothing out the creases, and began reading excerpts aloud, his voice steady and calm, carrying the gentle cadence that filled the cabin with warmth and the unspoken weight of respect for the memories preserved within the paper. Emily listened intently, eyes reflecting the soft firelight, imagining the lives and choices of those who had once called this place home, the quiet reverence fostering a connection that bridged time and circumstance. Outside, a faint rustle of branches announced a light breeze, carrying with it the crisp scent of snow and the lingering fragrance of pine sap, and the cabin seemed to absorb the movement, the walls alive with the subtle energy of life and history intertwined. Jack placed the letters back into the small hidden compartment, ensuring each piece was secure and undisturbed, a ritual of preservation that mirrored his own sense of responsibility for Emily and the life growing within her. Emily reached out to Rex, running a hand along his warm, thick coat, and he responded with a soft nudge, tail sweeping in slow, steady arcs, a silent affirmation that she was safe and cherished. Jack surveyed the room, noting small areas that required attention, a loose board, a drafty corner, a sagging ceiling beam, and made mental notes for the days to come, the process of planning and care providing a grounding rhythm, a sense of purpose and continuity in the quiet afternoon. The light shifted subtly as the sun began to descend toward the horizon, bathing the cabin in golden tones that softened the edges of the walls and highlighted the texture of the wood. Jack and Emily worked together to organize a small corner for practical needs, placing blankets, cushions, and supplies in accessible locations, each deliberate movement reinforcing their growing collaboration and shared investment in the space. Rex lay nearby, head resting lightly on the floor, eyes flicking between them, a silent witness to the trust and harmony forming in the room. The soft crackle of the fire, the faint hum of the wind outside, and the gentle interplay of sunlight and shadow combined to create a sanctuary, a place where care, attention, and quiet vigilance converged to foster hope. Jack settled back into a chair, sipping from his mug, and glanced at Emily, who returned his look with a subtle nod of acknowledgement. The moment filled with unspoken understanding that this cabin was no longer simply a refuge from the cold, but a space where safety, warmth, and the promise of a new beginning had begun to take root, ready to grow with patience, care, and the steady presence of loyal companionship. As night fully settled over the forest, the cabin glowed softly from the fire, casting gentle light across the walls and creating elongated shadows that flickered and danced with every shift of the flames. Jack Carter moved with careful precision, inspecting the final areas that had required attention during the day, his gloved hands tracing the worn edges of the wooden beams, ensuring that each piece was secure and stable, the quiet routine grounding him in a sense of accomplishment and calm. Rex lay close to Emily Thompson, his body a comforting warmth at her feet, ears twitching occasionally to faint sounds from the surrounding woods, the faithful dog serving as both guardian and companion, ever vigilant yet unobtrusive. Emily adjusted the blankets around her shoulders, the firelight warming her face as she watched Jack, a quiet smile reflecting the growing sense of safety and trust she felt within the cabin. The wind whispered softly outside, threading through the branches of the towering pines, carrying the crisp scent of snow and earth, and the cabin seemed to respond, absorbing the energy of the forest and echoing it as a gentle presence within the walls. Jack retrieved the small bundle of letters and photographs from their hidden compartment, laying them carefully on the table and smoothing each page, the sunlight filtering through the frost-specked windows and illuminating the delicate handwriting, the faded edges, and the subtle folds that held years of memories within them. Emily leaned forward, captivated, her fingers tracing the outlines of the images, imagining the lives and moments that had unfolded within the cabin long before they had arrived, a sense of connection and reverence weaving through the quiet room. Jack spoke softly, reading selected passages aloud, his voice steady and calm, blending with the faint crackle of the fire and the gentle rustle of the trees outside, creating a rhythm that felt both soothing and alive. Rex responded with a soft, contented whine, pressing his nose lightly against Emily's hand, affirming the comfort and security they all felt. Jack carefully returned the letters to the compartment, ensuring each piece was secure, and turned to observe the space around him, envisioning how each small repair, each thoughtful adjustment, could transform the cabin into a home filled with warmth and purpose. Emily assisted him in arranging blankets, cushions, and personal items, their collaborative movements establishing a rhythm of trust, care, and shared intent that strengthened the bond forming between them. The fire flickered and cast a warm glow across the room, the gentle shadows interweaving with the sunlight that lingered faintly on the walls, creating an atmosphere of calm, reflection, and quiet anticipation. Jack poured a cup of tea for himself and offered one to Emily, the steam curling upward and mingling with the scent of the cabin, the warmth a tangible reminder of safety and comfort. Outside, the forest lay serene under the soft light of the moon, snow glistening like scattered crystals across the ground, the pines swaying gently in the night breeze, a living presence that seemed to watch over the cabin and its occupants. Jack and Emily moved together to prepare a modest meal, sharing it quietly beside the fire, the act reinforcing their sense of partnership and mutual support, each gesture deliberate and caring, the simplicity of the moment magnified by the surrounding stillness. Rex settled between them, eyes half closed but attentive, a steady heartbeat of loyalty and awareness grounding the small circle of warmth, light, and trust. As the evening deepened, Jack and Emily sat together, sipping their tea, listening to the subtle sounds of the forest and the gentle crackle of the fire. The cabin now more than a shelter. It had become a place of presence, of connection, and of hope. Jack's gaze drifted to the hidden compartments, imagining the stories yet to be uncovered and the lives that might intersect with theirs in this quiet, enduring place. Emily rested her hand on Rex, feeling the steady warmth and calm assurance of his presence, and together, the three of them experienced a rare and profound quiet, a sense of belonging and the promise of new beginnings that stretched beyond the cabin walls into the forest and beyond, carrying the gentle conviction that kindness, patience, and attentiveness could transform even the most forgotten spaces into havens of hope and care. The late morning sun filtered through the frost-specked windows, casting a soft, golden glow across the cabin floor and illuminating the small dust particles that floated lazily in the air. Jack Carter moved deliberately, attending to the small repairs he had planned, checking the alignment of the floorboards, adjusting the shutters to reduce drafts, and brushing away remnants of dust and snow that had collected near the corners. Rex padded quietly beside him, ears swiveling attentively to every subtle sound, nose twitching as he caught the faint sense of the forest beyond the cabin walls, a silent guardian ensuring nothing went unnoticed. Emily Thompson adjusted her position near the fire, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, the gentle heat radiating through her fingers and chest, easing the tension that had remained from their first days in the cabin. She watched Jack with quiet appreciation, noting the precision and care in his movements, the thoughtful way he handled each object, and the calm determination that seemed to imbue the space with a sense of order and protection. Outside, the snow-covered forest sparkled in the sunlight, each branch glinting with frost as the wind whispered through the pines, carrying the crisp scent of winter and pine sap, creating a serene symphony that mingled with the quiet rhythm inside the cabin. Jack returned to the hidden compartment, lifting carefully the letters and photographs, laying them on the table and examining the delicate handwriting, the subtle folds, and the worn edges, allowing the stories and memories preserved within to unfold gently in his mind. Emily leaned closer, her eyes tracing the lines of the letters, imagining the moments captured within them, feeling a quiet connection to the lives and experiences of those who had once occupied the cabin, and a gentle sense of continuity settled over her. Jack read aloud selected passages, his voice steady and calm, blending seamlessly with the crackle of the fire and the soft murmur of the forest outside, each word imbued with respect for the past and a sense of shared reverence for the memories that had waited patiently for discovery. Rex shifted, pressing gently against Emily's legs, offering warmth and reassurance, his presence a subtle reminder of trust and loyalty in the quiet room. Jack carefully returned the letters to the compartment, securing them with attention and care, and turned to consider the larger space, envisioning how small adjustments could transform the cabin into a safe, comfortable, and welcoming home. Emily rose to assist, arranging cushions and blankets near the fire, creating a cozy corner, the simple act reinforcing their shared purpose and growing bond. The sunlight shifted, illuminating frost crystals along the windows and casting long, gentle shadows across the floor, and Jack took a deep breath, feeling the quiet satisfaction of the morning's progress, a sense of hope and stability settling over him. Outside, the wind carried a soft, melodic rustle through the pines, and the cabin seemed to absorb the energy, the walls and beams alive with the quiet rhythm of life and nature intertwined. Jack guided Emily in small tasks around the cabin, teaching her how to secure a loose shutter, place logs for the fire, and arrange the blankets for warmth and comfort, each movement deliberate, thoughtful, and filled with care. Rex settled once more near Emily's feet, alert yet relaxed, the loyal presence anchoring the space and reinforcing the quiet sense of home forming around them. Jack paused to sip his tea, letting the warmth spread through him, and observed Emily organizing the small kitchen area, a sense of satisfaction and quiet pride filling him as he realized the cabin had begun to transform from a simple refuge into a sanctuary. The cabin hummed softly with the sounds of life, the crackle of the fire, the rustle of blankets, the subtle sniffing and shifting of Rex, creating a sanctuary of warmth, safety, and hope. Jack glanced toward the hidden compartment one final time, imagining the stories that had been preserved within, and allowed himself a quiet smile, knowing that the past had guided them to this point, and that the present held the promise of care, companionship, and a future imbued with trust and renewal. Emily reached down to gently stroke Rex, feeling the steady warmth and calm assurance of his presence. And together, the three of them shared a moment of profound quiet, the cabin now more than a shelter, a place where patience, kindness, and attentive care had nurtured hope and the first seeds of a new beginning. The afternoon sunlight streamed softly through the frost-lined windows, illuminating the cabin interior with a warm, golden hue that danced across the wooden floor and walls. Jack Carter moved deliberately, adjusting the fire and stacking a few logs to maintain a steady warmth that would carry them through the coming hours. The gentle crackle of burning would blending with the soft hum of the winter forest outside. Rex padded quietly beside him, ears alert to every subtle movement, tail sweeping slowly, a constant presence of loyalty and reassurance. Emily Thompson adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, sipping from a cup of warm tea, the gentle heat spreading through her chest and calming the tension that had lingered since their arrival. She watched Jack, noting the precision and care in his actions, the thoughtful way he handled each object and corner of the cabin, and a quiet admiration and gratitude stirred within her. Outside, the snow-laden pines glistened in the filtered sunlight, the soft rustle of the wind carrying the crisp scent of pine and snow into the cabin, creating a serene symphony that complemented the warm rhythm inside. Jack returned to the hidden compartment and lifted the carefully preserved letters and photographs, laying them gently on the table and examining each with reverence, tracing the faded ink and worn edges, imagining the moments, the laughter, and the quiet reflections of those who had once inhabited this space. Emily leaned closer, her eyes scanning the delicate handwriting, imagining the stories captured within each page, a sense of continuity bridging the past and their present quietly taking hold. Jack read aloud selected excerpts, his voice calm and steady, blending with the subtle crackle of the fire and the soft sigh of wind through the trees, the cadence of his words filling the cabin with warmth, respect, and reverence. Rex pressed gently against Emily's legs, emitting a soft, approving whine, affirming the calm and trust that had grown in the room. Jack returned the letters to their compartment, carefully securing the contents, and then moved to check the remaining areas in the cabin that required attention. He inspected the beams, adjusted a drafty shutter, and smoothed a few rough floorboards, each motion deliberate and thoughtful, a meditation of care and diligence. Emily assisted by arranging cushions and blankets, creating a small, comfortable area near the fire, the simple act of collaboration reinforcing the quiet partnership and shared responsibility that had formed between them. The sunlight shifted gradually, illuminating frost crystals along the windows and casting gentle, elongated shadows across the floor, and Jack paused to take in the scene, appreciating the calm, the warmth, and the subtle sense of accomplishment that had begun to fill the cabin. Outside, a soft breeze stirred the pines, carrying a hint of cold, crisp air that mingled with the warmth inside, creating a contrast that felt alive and comforting simultaneously. Jack guided Emily through a few minor adjustments, showing her how to secure a loose shutter and manage the fire, each gesture fostering confidence, trust, and connection. Rex settled comfortably beside Emily, alert yet relaxed, eyes occasionally lifting to scan the room, the embodiment of vigilance and companionship. Jack sipped from his cup of tea, letting the warmth seep through him, and observed Emily arranging small personal items, a quiet pride and satisfaction settling in his chest. The cabin hummed with gentle life. The crackle of the fire, the faint shifting of blankets, the soft breathing of Rex, all blending together to create a sanctuary of care, patience, and attentive presence. Jack glanced at the hidden compartment one final time, imagining the stories within and feeling the profound responsibility of preserving the past while nurturing the present. Emily reached down to stroke Rex's head, feeling the steady warmth and calm assurance of his presence, and the three of them sat in quiet companionship, the cabin no longer merely a refuge, but a home where hope, safety, and the gentle promise of new beginnings had begun to take root, quietly stretching beyond its walls into the forest and the lives they were creating together. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the distant ridge, casting long, golden beams that filtered through the frost-specked windows of the cabin, illuminating the small particles of dust that floated lazily in the warm, amber light. Jack Carter moved deliberately, tending the fire to ensure a steady warmth would continue through the approaching evening, the gentle crackle of the flames filling the room with a comforting rhythm. Rex lay alert at Emily Thompson's feet, his amber eyes scanning the room and the subtle shadows cast by the firelight, a silent guardian who offered both reassurance and presence without disturbance. Emily adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, feeling the steady heat of the fire and the calm atmosphere that had settled over the cabin since morning, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that radiated warmth through her fingers and chest. She watched Jack, noting the precise and careful way he moved about the room, inspecting the small repairs, adjusting the furniture, and checking the hidden compartment, each movement filled with intention and respect for the space and the memories it held. Outside, the forest was quiet, the snow-laden pines glistening in the fading sunlight, and the wind whispered softly through the branches, carrying the crisp scent of pine and fresh snow into the cabin, mingling with the warmth and aromas of the fire and tea. Jack returned to the hidden compartment and lifted carefully the bundle of letters and photographs, laying them on the table to examine each piece, his fingers tracing the faded handwriting and worn edges, appreciating the quiet stories and lives that had once existed within these walls. Emily leaned closer, curiosity and wonder bright in her eyes, imagining the moments captured within the delicate paper, a sense of connection and continuity spreading through her as she contemplated the history of the cabin. Jack read aloud a few passages, his voice steady and calm, harmonizing with the soft crackle of the fire and the distant rustle of the trees outside, creating an atmosphere that was both contemplative and comforting. Rex pressed gently against Emily's legs, a reassuring presence as they absorbed the quiet stories together. Jack replaced the letters in the compartment with deliberate care, ensuring their preservation while maintaining the integrity of the cabin, and turned to observe the broader space, envisioning the potential for it to become a safe, warm home for both Emily and her child. Emily assisted by arranging cushions, blankets, and small personal items, creating a comfortable corner near the fire, the simple collaborative effort strengthening the bond between them and deepening the shared sense of purpose. The sunlight shifted gradually, illuminating frost crystals on the windows and casting long, subtle shadows across the floor, and Jack paused to take a deep breath, feeling a profound sense of calm and satisfaction, recognizing the quiet accomplishment that had grown from their patient efforts throughout the day. Outside, the wind stirred lightly, carrying hints of crisp winter air, and the cabin seemed to breathe along with it, a quiet symphony of nature and warmth. Jack guided Emily through minor adjustments and small preparations, demonstrating care in securing shutters and tending the fire, each movement deliberate, fostering confidence, trust, and shared attention. Rex settled back near Emily's feet, tail sweeping slowly, eyes occasionally lifting to monitor the room, a steady presence anchoring the space with silent loyalty. Jack sipped his tea, letting the warmth spread through him, while observing Emily arranging the remaining items, a quiet pride and contentment settling within him. The cabin resonated with the sounds of life, the gentle crackle of the fire, the soft shifting of blankets, Rex's relaxed breathing, forming a sanctuary filled with warmth, attentiveness, and care. Jack glanced once more at the hidden compartment, reflecting on the stories preserved within, and allowed a subtle, contented smile, understanding that this place, nurtured with patience, kindness, and presence, had become more than shelter. Emily reached down to stroke Rex's head, feeling the steady, calm assurance of his warmth, and together the three of them shared a final quiet moment in the cabin, a space transformed into a home where hope, safety, and the gentle promise of new beginnings had quietly taken root, ready to grow and flourish in the days to come, carrying the assurance that attentive care and kindness could turn even the most forgotten place into a haven of warmth, trust, and enduring life.